As I look around the table, we're all here. Hello, everybody. Nice to see you. The agenda items for discussion is one. It's 12/48/23 WS Council will receive information and discuss the FY12-13 budget items identified for the follow-up by Council. Terry? No, I'm sorry. City Manager Brian Dahlke.
Yes, Mayor, Council. Tonight the agenda, and I guess I have to slide it over here. Sorry about that. Tonight's agenda is really going to focus on three items: the property tax. There's been a lot of discussion, I think some misunderstandings of what we're doing with the property tax, how it affects our citizens. So we felt it was very important to go back through some fundamental elements of the property tax. We will also be seeking council direction on the liquor license renewal. And then finally, it will be a point where council has an opportunity to ask any follow-up questions on the budget book that was distributed last week. We did provide some answers to council during the week, end of last week, and certainly are open to other questions as council has. So that's the agenda tonight, and we'll go ahead and get started. First thing, and apologize for to the public, this is more illustrative, but the property tax bill that citizens get, there are really two elements to the tax bill. First is a primary portion of the property tax. And on this, you'll see the different taxing districts. You'll see it everything from the county to the state education that really comes up with an equalization for education. You'll see the state aid credits that gives to homeowners that are residing in their primary residences. They get a tax credit for that. And then you'll see the tax districts below that are the school districts. But within that, and highlighted in red, you'll see the tax rate of the primary portion that's for City of Goodyear. A couple of items you'll see in there. 2011, and this particular tax bill is of a parcel that's in Canyon Trails. It's real close to what our current median home value is, which is $133,600. This one, you'll see that it's very close to that, within a few $100s. So we wanted to pull this one up to just really demonstrate what we're looking at as it relates to the average house. On the primary tax bill, you'll see in there that you had $125.82 for the primary for 2011, and then that was in 2010, it was $122. So you'll see that on the far two right columns for City of Goodyear. And I want to then go to the other part of a property tax bill that's a secondary. Secondary has to do with the debt service, the bond indebtedness, if you will, for geofinancing. Primary can be used by cities for pretty much everything. That can go into ongoing expenses. That's what we use it for to run this government. The secondary, which is this one, that's the one that deals with the debt service. So that's the other part of the tax bill. In this one, you'll see the several tax districts. Again, we have no control over, but you'll see on the bottom tax districts where you actually have bonds. It will be highlighted in there as far as city bonds. That's our general obligation bond financing. And with that, you'll see that we have in there $87.30 for 2011. 2010, it was actually higher at $107 in round numbers. So it just shows how this fluctuates back and forth, again, more illustrative. But what's interesting about this in 2011, it actually went down about 7.4% from 2011 as compared to 2010. So this tax bill actually went down. Yes, ma'am.
That's what I was going to ask. When we look at the first and the second, although the one went up, the second went down, this citizen on this bill would have been paying less in taxes in their amount to the city.
Yes, that's correct. About 7.4% less, and we had the and I'll be going through a little bit of history and where we're at with the taxes valuations to put this in perspective. This is a historical assessed valuation. This has been provided to council before, but the only thing that's changed on this is we're using what the county assessor is giving us for projected assessed valuation for next year. But this is, it puts it in perspective. We're in strange times. We have not been in times where housing values and commercial values have dropped like this over this length of time in many, many years. So you'll see that at the top, we're over $1 billion in assessed valuation, 2009. 2013, we're a little over $600 million, and we're looking at being less even next year. That will be the following tax year, budget year that we'll be faced with. But that just puts it in perspective with the valuations that are going on. I do want to, a couple of facts on this. We have dropped since 2009, we've dropped, our assessed valuations have dropped 40%. And just this past year, about 10%, 2012 to 2013. So that's how volatile the valuations have been in recent years. Okay, this chart I'm going to spend a little bit of time on, and wanted to take it back to 2009 when really we started to see things changing. In 2009, you'll see in there both the primary property tax levy, secondary tax levy. You'll see the amounts at 4.9 million for primary, 9.3 million for secondary. So the total tax levy in 2009 was $14.2 million. We had a property tax rate of $1.60 per 100 assessed valuation, and in that year, our median home value was $261,000 for a total tax bill to that resident of $417. Again, you'll notice the tax levy is higher. Property tax rate was $1.60, and it really is a mathematical calculation that ties the levy to the property tax rate to the assessed valuations. So that's how that works. 2010, you'll notice that we actually went up with our tax levy of $14.89 million. So it was an increase in the tax levy. Now, a tax levy is nothing more than the revenues that we need to run the city, both from a property tax point of view, for both primary and secondary. So it did go up that year. We had our property tax rate stayed the same. Median home value dropped to $208,000. And you notice that the tax payment actually went down. So yet you wonder, okay, wait a second, the tax levy went up, median home value went down, but the tax rate dropped as well when you're holding the rate at $1.60. Fundamentally, that was a couple of things that caused that. One was commercial values at that time were high, construction was high, added to the tax rolls. So we had a lot of activity as it related to development that actually increased the amount of valuation that was coming into the city. At the same time, residential was decreasing, starting to decrease, and that was about 27% then. So you see there are fluctuations constantly that affect the dynamics of tax rates, tax payments. 2011, what happened there is a council, we made a shift from general obligation bond financing. This portion, moved that portion that was water, wastewater related over to the utilities, over to water, over to wastewater. We were able to drop the tax levy at that point. Big change, 21.9%. So it was a big change. We were able to drop the tax rate for that year, and as I remember clearly, we knew that was a temporary adjustment to the tax rate because we were able to move some of the indebtedness over to the enterprise fund. So it did allow us to do that.
And I'm going to interject here, and we made that extremely clear that $1.4233 was just for that year, and we used this money we had to change that, to buy it down, essentially. Joe?
My only comment, and again, I know you're going to go through and probably cover some of this, is that's why I've always had heartburn over focusing on the rate. And the reason being that is so many variables go into it, as what you're mentioning right now. Commercial properties dropping, the percentage that it's assessed is dropping. We have new construction that comes on every year that adds to it. We have residential. In fact, You know, I pulled mine up the other day, looked since 2010 to 13, and because of us dropping, and again, that's the point I want to make. Since 10, we've actually dropped the total tax we've collected. We have not raised the taxes. The reason why it may or may not impact your specific property depends on where you are in that class of property and how fast or how slow or how quick your particular assessed valuation happens to be either dropping or some may actually be increasing. But I took a look at mine because I see the levy from 2010, and the reason why I always like to pick that was the year before we decided as a council to start moving the money from the water and sewer general obligation bonds to where they're supposed to be. There for years, people in the Liberty Water and Lipscomb Water District were subsidizing the Goodyear Water Company and Sewer Company. So now we've moved that. That's the main reason for that
Can
drop.
I interrupt you
Yes.
right now? Because we may have some people listening that don't realize that the north side of the city, and where's the cutoff on the north side, was subsidizing the south side in that water issue.
Thank you.
I-10.
Yes. And
Outside
that's,
of I-10, excuse me.
from a council standpoint, I'm very proud of the fact of fairness. We've now corrected that, and that's the key reason for that drop. But again, from my perspective, why the rate? You look at $1.60 in 2010, and then you look at $1.7750 in 2013 proposed. Somebody would look at that number and go, "Oh, you're raising taxes." And the reality is, it's dropped 28% from that period until the fiscal year 2013. Okay, so I think the focus on and you know me, I've been hard on this rate because to me the kicker is how much taxes you're paying, and that's why I think the focus should always be on the levy. And for anybody say that our taxes are going up, that's not true. They are actually going down. The thing is depending on where your assessed valuation are, because the median is what, $6, which is a 3% increase overall. Depends on where your property happens to be. You actually are still may have a tax drop or a little more. So I think that's important to drive that point home because I've seen somebody send me an email that tries to kind of tweak the rate and mislead on what's actually happening overall. There's the numbers. That's not what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you. And you did get into a couple of my points. I think you've been looking over my shoulder, but great points. And I want to reinforce a couple of those and perhaps enhance, but you're absolutely right. When you look at this from 2009 to 2013, for this house, or the median house, it's gone from $417 tax burden down to $220. That is a significant decline. And we're absolutely, it's about a 25% decrease is what it amounts to. So we are very interested in holding the line on the levy because that's truly the taxes that we are requiring to run the government, and we're holding it. We're reducing those, in fact. A couple of points, though, and I think part of this chart, the reason I want to spend a few minutes on it, and Councilmember Pizzillo, you hit on some of those. This tries to pull it all together. I think we have not done a good enough job of pulling it all together so you can see it all in front of you. Because when you think about a tax rate going to $1.77 and the year before was $1.60, that doesn't mean that your property taxes are necessarily going up. There's so many other dynamics that change that. But a couple of things I do want to point out. The Citizen Budget Committee and this council has focused on the state allows for us to increase our primary property tax by 2% per year. We have done that. If you do not do that, you can never go back and add to it. So that's a great public policy.
Oh, just repeat that one time. We had, what, how many people on the Budget Committee?
There were close
20,
to 30 originally,
30,
and then ended with close to 20.
And that decision to do, we have initiated or continued with the same recommendation that the Budget Committee made. Is that correct?
That's correct. And when we come back before the council on something called Truth in Taxation, that's exactly what that action is. That maintains that ability to increase it at 2% per year. No more as it relates to your primary property tax, plus new growth goes on top of that. Our new growth, and Councilmember Pizzillo, back to your point, Our new growth for this past year was about $400,000. So that's new construction, and that really emphasizes the point how important economic development is. When you bring in the businesses, when even new homes come in, it increases the tax base. You increase the tax base, it lowers the burden on the rest of those individuals and businesses that are here. So economic development, that's one that we will be maintaining as a high priority and trying to build that tax base accordingly. A couple of other things, even though, we're at now for 2013, we're looking at average median of $124,000, and $100 to be exact, and we're estimating that increase at $6.52. That's 54 cents a month. So it is, but that's the median home that is going up that much in price. It's interesting that for those homes that are not going up, let me do it this way. If a home is decreasing by less than 10% or has increased at all, they're the ones that will be seeing some type of tax increase. For those homes that are not going up more than 10%, they won't be. So that's important to point out. There are a lot of citizens that their tax bill will not be affected. Matter of fact, it could even be going down.
I would just note that if you're collecting less, even though it's small, and 400,000 of that happens to be new growth, and the median is $6, somebody's going down, somebody's going up. Median means middle, so that means you got several below and you got several above. So it all depends, and again, as I mentioned earlier, it all depends on, there's parts of our community whose assessed value are dropping faster than others. And that's going to make a determination on whether it's 6. Because I pulled one up for a friend the other day who actually went down about $2. Mine is actually going to go up 16, because for some reason in the earlier years, mine was dropping faster than it did in 11, 12. So.
Thank you. So again, the intent was to really lay this out in one slide, and if you have any other questions, certainly would try and answer those.
Questions?
Okay, the next one, what's happening is we've seen over the years ago, businesses and industry were paying what we call a 25% assessment ratio. Homeowners have been paying 10%. And there was an argument early on back in my economic development careers, I remember this vividly, is that businesses were paying 2.5 times the rate than as compared to homeowners, 25% versus 10%. And the concern was it hurt our ability, Arizona, to bring in capital-intensive businesses, those that had to pay a larger property tax, and it really hurt our chances. So there's been an effort, and that was through the Arizona Chamber of Commerce and many others, to start reducing the amount of burden on businesses. And as part of that, you'll see that it's been ratcheting down since 2005 to where we're at today at 20%. It has steadily been dropping over the last several years. Residential has maintained the same at 10%. Going forward, and again, this is by state statute, this is where we're headed. In 2016, businesses will now be paying 18%. That's 7% less on their ratios as compared to back in 2005. So what happens is they will be paying less of the total tax pie than they used to, which shifts the burden, and you'll see the arrow on the bottom of this. It actually shifts the tax burden back towards the residential. And the goal was to try and somewhat equalize the burden on both residential and businesses. So that's been done by the state, and that is what's happening.
Do they have a goal?
The goal is to get it to 18%. I'm not sure where
18% was the goal?
18% is the goal.
Okay.
And there's been some discussion to get it even lower than that. I've heard it maybe a push to get it to 15%, but right now this is what's in front of us.
Would that go back to the legislature to go down to that low?
As I understand, yes, Mayor.
Gary?
I have a comment I think one of the drivers that this property tax assessment ratios helps us, while it doesn't help the average person, there are a lot of externalities, especially in economic development. Some of the distribution centers and new businesses that we have in Goodyear as a result of this driving down of the property tax. And I think, you know, the homeowners, while they may not like what they're seeing because they are actually paying a little bit more of the burden, the fact that we have jobs in Goodyear and the fact that we have employment, and that throws off all the other benefits of people working in Goodyear, is something that we need to be, you know, very cognizant of. It makes us a little bit more business friendly, which is something that I know our citizens would like us to do.
Joe?
No, I'm fine.
You're
I don't
fine?
have anything to add to
All
that.
right.
And I would just add that the other thing is businesses, their valuations are a lot more than residential. So even though that their assessed ratio is going down, their property values are obviously substantially more than what residential are. So they'll still be paying a very
Sherry?
large share.
Brian, can we get the thumbnail version of this perhaps in the In Focus so that a normal resident who isn't going to listen to this meeting can look at it and say, this is, no, I'm serious. People aren't going to sit here and watch an hour meeting, but if it's
But it's
in there.
so interesting.
But when you hear from people and you read a line in the paper that says your taxes are going up, and I know this is enthralling, but you know, to sit here for an hour and listen to it, and when our citizens, I think it'd be very helpful if it could be the focus so that they could get it, maybe that example, and explain what they are. Because I know you can go on the website and look at, but if we make it easy for people, then when they hear the talk, oh, your rate's going up. Okay, but my taxes necessarily aren't going up.
Well, we might be able to do that by taking my column and the council column and making it just one column with information, and I think that would do it. Joe?
Just real quick, in addition though, Brian, isn't also at the beginning of the recession, residential values were dropping at a faster pace than commercial, and now commercial is catching up. So not only do you have the impact of the percentage that they're being assessed at dropping of their value, but you also have the impact as well of that their property values are dropping now faster rate than residential. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, it's accurate, Mr. Pizzil.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oops.
I do. The next slide, and that puts it in perspective as it relates to tax year 11 versus 12, because of the shift. Also, as was talked about, the valuations, especially that's hitting commercial, and now you'll see the following year where the assessed ratio is going to be less for business. The pie starts changing. You may have the same tax levy, but in this situation, you look at non-residential, which is your businesses, they paid 55%. A year later, they're paying 52%. Pie is still same size. So that's this will put it in perspective as it relates to the kind of the cost sharing or the cost shifting of taxes. So council policy actions, I want to go over a couple of things. One is the situation in our city is not unique to Goodyear. It really is because of the state, the drops in valuations for commercial lagging residential, and because of this change in state statutes reducing the assessed ratios, all cities are going through this. The other is there are a couple of things that the city has done as it relates to taking action to try and balance this out. One is we did refinance some of our tax-exempt bonds, and that did change. Matter of fact, it was about $750,000 in savings on the tax levy because we were able to actually shift this by saving interest, not increasing the term, but saving interest on the bonds. So that was one of the items that council did to try and reduce the impacts. The other is we have authority. We have the authority given to us by the voters of Goodyear, our citizens, that allows us to sell more bonds. And we have an ability to sell those. That was gone through last week. But the policy direction of council, and certainly supported by management, is we are not going to be selling new general obligation bonds. We did not last year, and we do not plan to next year either. So as part of that, if we're not selling general obligation bonds, we're not increasing the debt, therefore we're not increasing the secondary taxes higher to even make a higher tax burden on our citizens. We're watching our new debt very carefully.
Joanne?
I have a question. I'm not sure if this is really the place you want me to ask it, but since the lowering of food tax is up here, I know recently we received I think it was the March sales tax report, and just looking at how the budgeted amount for each month versus the actual had come in over the last, I think it was 10 months showing, it was about a $1.8 million increase that, came to our city that was not budgeted over the actual. So I guess my questions, in this next year, I don't know if you do this monthly, if you do this actually annually, do you have the budget amount for sales tax per month, total sales tax per month, for this next year? Because if we are assuming that same type of increase will be occurring, $1.8 million or something in that ballpark, then I would say there's no reason why we couldn't be lowering our food tax more this coming year. So I would like to see what kind of info you have on that.
Larry?
The gain this year that you're referring to, the $1.8 million, a major portion of that is construction sales tax, which is in the one-time category, not in the ongoing category.
Okay.
The other thing is that, and you'll notice from the report and the comments the city manager made, but I'm not going to throw him under the bus. I'm going to use the word I so that he can disclaim any that he chooses. But we have seen, I'm seeing a trend that our growth year over year in the non-construction sales tax is slowing in the last half of the year. The growth is slowing. Okay, it's still growth, so don't misunderstand there. But yeah, in the total tax, that has gone up quite a bit. Next year, this year we budgeted $3 million construction sales tax through 10 months. We're at $3.8 million, projecting to be about $4.5 million or somewhere a little shy of that. Next year's budget we have in at $5 million, figuring that the 303 will provide enough to get us to that level.
Okay, that is a whole different scenario, and I won't say anything more. Thank you.
Yes, Gary?
I want to, follow up on what Joanne said and ask Larry. In January of 2013, when we start working on the next year's budget, again, you will have a year's worth of food tax receipts to be able to see what the differentiation is over a period, over at least a 1 year. You'll have a good history on what this tax is worth. So that one of the things I learned, I asked some questions and I found out that when we reduce the food tax is only food for home consumption, which is very different than what most of us consider as food. Potato chips are not, even though I consume them at home, potato chips are not food for home consumption, nor is beer and wine food for home consumption. So one, the impact.
The nutritious thing you're talking about,
course,
nutrition.
Okay. The important things in life: chips, beer,
beer and wine.
Beer and wine. So one of the things I did learn when we initially looked at reducing this food tax, most of the estimates were a lot higher than what we're actually seeing. And so what I would, hope that we can do is, once we have a year's worth of data, next year when we're preparing the budget again come January, we can look at accelerating, because we're going to implement the food tax reduction in January, as Councilman Pizzillo has suggested, like we did last year. And we can look at that and have a better feel for implementing how fast we want to accelerate this, and if we can get rid of this food tax over the next few years, I think that would really help our citizens.
Joanne?
I'm in complete agreement, and I still thought we would be seeing it maybe in October, but right, and that will still be at least 9 months worth of information. But I'm totally on board with that. I think that there's a possibility, and I know that's for another time, but I certainly stand behind getting rid of that. I think that'd be good.
Joe?
Just a mention on the food. Even the second year in a row at 2.25%, that still puts us the lowest city tax in the area, and I'm not sure how well that's known out there. So, with the exception of Glendale, which is at 1.8, and we'll be at 2, which is all of the increase removed at that point. And my gut feeling tells me that Glendale's rate at 1.8 for food may not stay there because some of their challenges they currently have. The reason why I mention that is I would encourage all the people in the area, if you're buying your groceries, to shop in Goodyear, because we will be the cheapest in the area. So it's a plug for Goodyear food stores.
Commercial time is over. It's all right.
Except for the potato chips. You could buy those elsewhere.
Chips and beer.
Yes.
Mayor.
Mr. Stipp?
Brian, we're still planning the tax discussion in the fall. I think you had mentioned that several weeks ago, that we were going to have a tax workshop or work session.
Yes, council member, that's correct. It was actually in my closing discussion points, but yes, we're looking at the fall of having a complete discussion on tax policy. Everything from retail sales tax, property tax, restaurants, you name it. Any tax revenue that we enact, we will be looking at. That's correct. And just to finish on the food tax, you'll note on the slide up there, it really depends on the individual family, but generally we're saying that the savings on the food tax, especially now dropping it down to 2%, that will have a greater impact of savings than the increase of $6.52 for the property tax. So we think that the net effect will be positive in the residents' favor.
Even at Gary's house?
Maybe not at Gary's house.
Summary, and just to summarize this portion, the property tax levy, again, it's remaining steady, actually slightly less at $10.7 million. And we do know that the values will be declining next year, so want to be keep that in your mindset as we look at how this impacts us next year. Because we know that is hitting us. We've been given that heads up by the county. And as we talked about, we'll have a discussion on tax policy at the fall retreat. But with that, that completes this portion of the work session. Can answer any other questions. Otherwise, we can move, Madam Mayor, to the next topic within the session.
Questions?
Just in your summary, again, I want to reiterate that even though it's only going down, was it $10,000, the levy? There's what, $400,000 of new construction in there?
400,000 new construction, that's correct.
So even though it's flat, there's still growth that's eaten up in there as well. So I just want to make sure people listening to that understands that it's not only not going up, but there's new growth in there as well. So.
All right, I think we're ready for the next subject.
Madam Mayor, the next subject was on the, going back to the very beginning, we are looking at the liquor license renewal.
Everybody has their downfall. Chips are mine.
council session, there was some discussion on the renewal fees for the liquor license and a question about whether you could distinguish between restaurant-type uses and retail-type uses. Council asked for a legal opinion on that, which we have provided to you under an attorney-client privilege communication, and given our opinion on that. I can certainly ask any or answer any questions you may have, but certainly our recommendation at this point is you don't distinguish between the two uses for the reasons that we detailed to you, and either at this point you need to have a conversation about whether retain the fee as it is or I think or distinguish.
Sherry?
Just so people watching this, what are the fees and what are the costs incurred for us to do the renewal, if we have those numbers?
I can give you some of the average figures we have, but it doesn't take into consideration everything. It's just in the city clerk's office what it would entail. The fee is $635 annually. Every December we invoice, and the payment is due in January. We contract when the fees are very different from when we process an initial application than when we just do the renewal. The renewal entails sending out an invoice to each of the establishments that have a license, and then following up on that, and then collecting the money and printing out a new license. So it takes, just for my staff, about a half hour per license for the renewal.
And that's for everybody, retail, they're all the
Yes.
same. And what are the average fees for the liquor license renewal for other cities, if we know?
Well, I did a survey in
just have everything.
we did a survey in 2010, and they were all over. I mean, so many cities have licenses. They go from, $200 up to $1,500 in Queen Creek for a renewal license. The city of Avondale just changed their fees in 2011. They charge $750 for the initial fee, and then all of their fees are dependent on what type of series it is. So their restaurant, for example, a restaurant fee, a renewal fee is $600. A beer and wine store is $200. So depending on the series, that's how they do their annual fees.
Yes, Gary?
One of the things that we don't do that I actually really think we should do is when we do an initial liquor license fee, we go to the police department and look at the applicant and look at their other properties or their history to see if they, one, have taken the liquor control class, two, if they have existing violations, or three, if they have issues where there's many police calls for drinking on the premises or underage drinking. Currently, we don't do this, and to a certain extent, we're just pretty much rubber stamping. We're saying, well, we don't know, and maybe we ought to look at, with a renewal fee, we ought to send it to our police department to screen for, for this type of activity. And if nothing is there, then we send it on a recommended fee. And if there is an issue, then maybe we want to talk to the state control board and say, maybe this, applicant has issues and needs further education.
I'm going to refer that to the lawyer again. This sounds similar to a question we asked before about distinguishing between two different type of businesses, and again, no, you aren't. I'm just saying,
Okay.
I just sense somewhere there might be a legality to this.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I think that is something you could do. I don't think it's something that's necessarily contemplated in the fee study. So to the extent you wanted to reevaluate that fee, and again, my recommendation is to keep it uniform across the board on those uses. That is certainly something you could factor in supporting the renewal fee, if that makes sense. I don't think that is contemplated in our current fee structure, but it would be a valid factor to consider in adopting a fee.
Thank you. Wally?
recently, and it's been within the last year, we had a request come before council for a liquor license, and information surfaced from the police department that caused this council to recommend no recommendation because they investigated the applicant and came up with things that were of a concern to us. So they do that now, do they not?
Just for the initial application.
All right. Okay, so are we going to decide tonight whether we continue the liquor license, or is this something we can discuss? And
I think we're going to, let's just get the total discussion done first and everybody's opinion, and then we'll work into what the direction is we want to take. Bill?
So, Lynn, you said that Avondale, based on the classification, has different rates,
Yes.
which I turn to the attorney and say, isn't that contrary to what you're suggesting?
said we couldn't.
The state has different fees for the different series. And maybe I don't know why they chose to do it that way, but I know the state, depending on what series you have, they have different fees.
So is there more at-risk areas?
Well, yes, and depending on when they adopted those fees, there was a change in the law which would impact your ability to adopt differential fees. So, again, 2011 was kind of a turning point in the law as far as an exemption for cities and towns under 100,000. So I don't want to second guess what the Avondale attorney gave an opinion on, but I wouldn't take the same opinion on that
Joe?
at this point.
I would suspect the Avondale increase is revenue in nature. And what I'm hearing is I understand, excuse me, I understand when we have the initial, there's reviews, the police department, there's cost associated with that, and I understand that. But to charge $635 for billing and collecting the money and processing, when, again, it's supposed to be cost recovery. And second of all, I thought it'd be nice to give them a break since we are among the highest on the sales tax side. I would like to see it gone. And you know my position hasn't changed, so that's where I'm at.
Bill?
I'm going to have to hold off on my follow-up question to Rourke for just a second. Joe, are you suggesting that the renewal fee be less than, or it certainly can't be zero because we're not cost recovering at that point. There is paperwork involved.
There's paperwork involved because we're billing them and we got to collect the money. That's the paperwork involved.
But every year their license needs to be renewed.
From the state. My point is if we get it up front, which there's cost involved in processing.
Right.
When it comes time to renewal, the reason why there's cost involved in the renewal is we're billing them. And my point is if you don't bill them, there's no cost involved. So there's no cost involved. Why are we charging for the renewal? Now, I have no problem when they first come in. And the only reason why I take the position on the renewal is only because I would like to be the lowest in an area on something. And again, you know, if you want to charge a little, I prefer to see zero. But again, I feel strongly only because it's a way of offsetting the 4%. I realize there are two different approaches, but to me it's nice to say we're zero, nobody else is zero, even though we charge a little more on the tax.
Bill,
So
you
that's
had a
where I'm at.
follow-up question.
Okay, so my original follow-up question then. I know you've done some research on that. Can you just, beside Avondale, can you throw out a couple of our other benchmark city for renewal fee only?
Right, and this is 2010.
Whatever the current data is that you have.
Let's see. Tolleson is the same as their application fee, so it's 120 to 400, which tells me that they have a different fee. Phoenix is 360 to 1400. Glendale's 360 to 1200. Peoria didn't give me amount, but they do have one. Gilbert is 360 to 1200. Apache Junction is $22.50. Mesa, $550, Scottsdale, $300 to $1,200, Buckeye, $1,000.
Okay. So everybody's charging for the initial, and everyone's charging for renewal.
Yes.
Okay.
Sherry?
My follow-ups are done. Thank you.
Okay, so I got a couple questions. So with the liquor license, whether I sell beer, wine, hard alcohol, it's the same in Goodyear, right?
For the renewal or
For the renewal?
Yes.
So I pay my $635 regardless what I'm selling. I don't have to do one for beer, one for wine,
Yes.
one for hard alcohol. Okay, then my other question is, I know like in some cities like Glendale, I just have to have a business permit that I pay $50 everywhere, and I actually get a little certificate I hang on my wall. Do we give them an actual certificate?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I guess I would agree with Joe up to the point is what the cost is to print and send out that certificate. I agree with what you were saying.
Wally?
I am just concerned now that I'm listening to all of these other cities that they seem to have a scale of what they charge, and we don't, because we don't.
Did we do this in the fee study? Wasn't this
I think the fee study just established
One set
one
fee.
fee.
one fee,
And
but
they
it didn't
don't all
establish a
have
fee?
sliding, just there are a lot that do.
Joanne?
Oh, I'm just thinking this through. But I guess I'm kind of understanding Sherry and Joe's side that if this is more or less just like we have the business license fee, which is based on paperwork and we're able to classify what businesses we have and things like that. That's important information that we get for that. But I question the $635 fee altogether just for that. Now, to Gary's point, that's actual work being done behind a renewal fee. So I guess that's a whole nother topic, But at the state level, annually, do they have to renew also?
Yes, they do, and I don't know if they do a background or to see if there's any violations when they do theirs.
Well, if we
Check
don't
into
we
that.
don't do something else, then I'm with Sharon Joe and lowering
Yep.
the amount. But if there's actual investigation and reporting behind what's going on, then I would open that discussion.
Before I turn it, I do have a question. I'm just assuming the state takes care of that. I mean, they can deny a license.
The background check
A renewal?
or and their renewal?
They get the initial,
Yes.
so there's no follow-up at all. If there's no feedback, if a business has a violation and
Florida Police Department, they do a background check, and then they work with the state, which is the license that Wally was referring to.
for the initial license. But renewal, I mean, if they had 10 violations, who would find out they had violations? What are the violations? Where are they going when they get a violation? Where is the information going if there's a violation?
We have never received anything in our
Does
office.
the police department know anything? Do we have anything?
Ask.
Liquor board?
Do we, is there any, no information. Interesting. City manager?
No.
Oh, that's all right.
Well,
Go ahead, Wally.
Wally?
I was going to ask Chief, do we ever do any undercover policemen into the bars to make sure they're not selling underage children? This is not that it's, we don't even know if we have this issue, but if we do, aren't you the one to look into it, or is it the state that does the undercover operations?
Mayor and Councilmember Campbell, it could be either. We do have the ability to do that, and we do checks where we go into alcohol establishments and do have the ability to look for minors who are consuming alcohol. But the state also serves a dual function on that. They can do the same thing. Sometimes we work in cooperation with each other to do that.
But would we discover anything on a renewal? No,
Not
we
the
would
way
just
we
fill out a piece of paper and send it on the way. Is that correct?
It doesn't go back to the police department?
No,
No,
I don't
so,
know, we can find that out for you. I don't know.
we
all right,
don't send it to you.
Okay.
Not right now.
Gary?
I was never in favor of doing away with this fee in the first place, and now I'm less in favor of doing away with it. I would like to see us maintain the fee and add some kind of protection to the city, whereas when we do a renewal, we have a policy that we go check for violations, and I think that justifies the fee that we're doing. It takes clerk time to process it. It takes city time, city police time to at least do a background check and an investigation, and then we're doing our responsibility to the citizens that says, okay, this person has a license to sell liquor, and therefore we have done a check to say that they're an upstanding seller of alcoholic beverages.
Joe?
Isn't there a liquor control board? Aren't we doing their job? I mean, isn't there a liquor control board that goes out, checks, you know, as far as the percentage? Because I know there's different percentages for restaurant, et cetera, in the spending. I mean, where does a complaint go if there's under, you know, if they're breaking the law? I assume you get some of it.
It
there
could
as
go
well.
to either. I mean, we can get them, or the state can get them, and I would assume that both entities would follow up. Again, we may talk with each other and you know, pass on information, so they would follow it up, or we would.
But you wouldn't go in just on I mean, we're not going to go in and knock on every establishment door and find out, are they honest or dishonest, or, I mean, you know, we'd have to come from a complaint. Wouldn't that be more democratic, that it would be a complaint and then?
Yes, Mayor, most likely it would result from a complaint or that we had received information that something was going
I
on.
mean, we don't want to give the idea that we're, you know, that we're that kind of council that, hey, we're guessing you're doing something wrong. Let's just wait, see if an incident happens, and then that would warrant us getting involved in this.
Correct.
I'm sorry, I forgot who's next. Joe?
No, I'm just going to say, but isn't the liquor board the one that'll either pull a license? I mean, if there's violations, we don't have the right to pull it. If you have a complaint and you file, there was charges underage, you would send, I would assume, a copy to the liquor board, and then they would take whatever action appropriate from a license standpoint. We don't have any authority to pull a license, correct?
I don't believe we have the authority to do that. That would go through the state.
Yeah.
Joanne?
Right. Oh. Well, that might have just answered it.
Oh.
Sherry and I were just looking at yes, and the state actually has a questionnaire under renewal that asks if there have been citations or things like that.
So who tells?
But that's my question though: is the state giving the citations, or if the city's giving? You know, if we look at this at the very end, if we say, okay, we are going to now start reporting any issues at the local level, and when it comes up for renewal, and we say, hey, you know what? You weren't a good cookie. We're not going to renew you. But what actual authority do we have? If we say we're not going to renew you, but okay, big deal. So they say, okay, you don't want to renew me. It's the state the actual has the control. But do we take that information and then go to the state, and does then the state come after them?
Vice Mayor, last year we had one restaurant that did not want to pay the fee out of all of the 77 at the time. And I did call the state and ask them, if they don't pay and we don't issue them a license, what happens? And I was told that at the time nothing would happen, but when it came time for the state to renew their license, they would take that into consideration, that they had not met their obligation from the city, and they would not issue a renewal license.
You know, it's interesting, this all came around, is that you had some people out there sending emails that said how unfair we were about charging this renewal fee or any liquor license fee, and that how our city was the worst of all of them, the most business-unfriendly city. That's how this conversation came to the council to start discussing this. And then secondly, I know I was one that brought up that I feel like the fee is justified. My question was renewal, the actual time and effort it takes. And maybe that is where the key of fairness is, but that we recover the hourly wage or the 15 or 20 minutes or day that it takes and recover that fee. I think, in my view, you're getting into areas that we don't belong into. So that's my opinion at this point. Joe?
Again, if we're recovering the fee on cost of billing and collecting the money and issuing a permit, and it's all generating the fee, it seems to me you remove that process, you save staff time to do other things, and you just save the $635. So, I mean, do we charge a renewal fee for bakeries? Do we charge a renewal fees for car dealers? Yeah, it's the business license. It's the business license. I assume these businesses are still getting a business license, aren't they? They're still getting a business license. They're just getting another one on top of it. So.
Wally?
My last comment is I don't want people to think we aren't concerned that we do not check at the establishments that sell the liquor and the beer to make sure they're not selling to our young people or having a keg or party somewhere and someone is getting them illegal liquor or beer or whatever. But on the other hand, because we want to keep everyone safe, I think we need to charge a fee to have the license. It is a privilege, and they're making a lot of money off of selling their beer and wine, so they're recouping 30 times more than what we're charging them. And I think if we do a renewal on them, it ought to be a lower cost perhaps. But I don't know how we keep track of who has a liquor license in our city and who doesn't if we don't charge a renewal fee, so that we don't have liquor stores and liquor places opening up that we don't know about.
So are you saying, as a council, that you would have a minimum on a renewal fee, $75, $100, whatever? Is that something you're considering? Joanne?
Just a quick question, Lynn. If you were to say there was a restaurant that would not be renewed, maybe the chief, would either one of you actually hear from the state that their liquor license was not renewed? Would you, either one of you, hear that?
We don't hear
I don't know that
anything.
we would either.
We periodically
So
go
we wouldn't
into the
even-
state
I can't
website.
imagine that the council wouldn't hear if an establishment that was successful all of a sudden couldn't get his license renewed. We might hear something, but
That's at
there's
the
no
state level.
guarantees.
But that's at the state level. And, to me, I'm sorry, being able to sell liquor is a privilege. I think that it is, and I think that they have to respect that. And we obviously want our police to be monitoring it. It's not making me feel like there's a lot of monitoring going on. I'm saying against our own city, but just in general, I'm wondering how much monitoring actually
Well, I think
occurs.
that we have to remember is that when they get this liquor license, there are criteria that comes with it, and there are crimes that can be happen because of this. And I think that most business people look at that criteria and say, and train their people in the bars, and you know how many managers have we come before us, and you've asked the question, how do you train your employees? How would they be checking for liquor license? And they assure you that that's what they're doing. So, my feeling at this point, there is a thing called trust and responsibility, and it's responsibilities on that ownership if they violate this and get caught. Then that's the story. But I'm not sure I want to be government into these businesses and snooping. I want them to abide by the laws, but I just don't think that's our place. That's my opinion. Sherry?
And I'm definitely going to give the chief a pass on this one. I don't think there's not a lot of enforcement. I don't think we have a lot of places that bring this type of enforcement necessary, like the youth alcohol squads at Phoenix and Old Town Scottsdale and Tempe have. We're not attracting that here. We really don't have that problem, is my understanding. So that's probably why we don't have to have the enforcement. And if it gets to a time that, when the city center and the mall come, that might be something we will have to look at. And then we may want to look at raising back up the fee to pay for the enforcement actions and a squad or officers to go in and actually do that type of work. Because when you start bringing the mall, you're bringing more young people, more kids, and more problems where you might have some youth drinking issues. But for now, whatever the cost, the hourly cost, I'm for lowering the fee to cover the cost. I think we do need to have some sort of fee and some sort of license. I guess we give them a printed license like their business license, so we can monitor a list, so that if the state does call and say there's a problem, we actually have a document and a list to go off of. not just a business license, because I have a business license, but I'm not selling alcohol out of my shop. So, so I think we need to lower, and I would just do for cost recovery for that. Bill?
I hate to backtrack, but I've been trying to follow this and keep tabs on it all. I own a bar, and I decide I'm going to sell to underage kids. And I get caught by either someone reports it or whatever. PD goes, checks it out, says, yeah, he's selling. What happens to that information? What do you do with it?
Well, most likely, if it's a criminal violation, you would be cited by the officer. If we receive local information, the odds are we're going to follow up on that. We can always reach out to the state and do some kind of joint thing, but we will follow up on that, and if we can catch somebody in progress doing that, they're most likely going to get cited.
Okay, so you cite the bartender for selling to underage. What happens to my liquor license? Who tells the state of Arizona that I was selling, or that someone in my establishment was selling to underage? Anybody?
I can find that out for you.
I guess where I'm going with that is, it kind of gets to what Joanne's saying. If the state system is broken and there's not a follow-up mechanism in place, then what are we really charging the fee for? Yeah. We are charging the fee for what Joe's talking about, for filing paperwork so that we can have a fee. So if we're not following up on anything and there's no avenue in there, this fee is really pointless. There is no cost recovery of anything except a source of revenue.
So you're just talking about the renewal fee.
The renewal fee.
Just the renewal
Just
fee.
the renewal fee.
The only thing is that there's a list now of restaurants, stores, whatever, in our town that sell liquor, that if the liquor board, by some crazy chance, came back to our city and said, what do you have on them, you would say, oh, well, they paid their renewal fee. But that's it. That's it. That's all.
Gary?
I come back down to, I think the fee, I think with the enhanced work that we would do next year by actually checking on the establishment and having some kind of, records check on that would justify the fee. I can live with a lower fee, but I will not support the abolition of this fee.
The renewal fee.
The renewal fee.
Bill? Sorry.
So we're going to now take action on something we've been charging for, and we're going to try to
We've only charged 1 year for it.
Which is okay. At least we found out about it now and not 5 years down the road. So we're going to create work so we can continue to charge this fee.
But I think it's part of the public safety. I mean, if you go to the police, if you go to the Comstat meetings, you will hear about the beer runs that happen at our convenience store. And the beer run is somebody walks in, grabs a six-pack or a case of beer, and goes out the door. Does that necessitate a call for service? Yes, it does. And the question is, how many of those do we need to have before that becomes a public safety issue when somebody's fleeing and hits somebody? Okay, yeah, you're right. I'm trying to justify it from a cost accounting point of view because Councilman Pizzillo thought that it was all we were doing is printing a piece of paper and it costs 50 cents to do this. Well, we have a moral responsibility to actually maintain some kind of coverage and some kind of knowledge base based on the fact that they're selling liquor because liquor is a controlled substance. We're going to...
Bill?
No, I get it. But that would be like charging retailers more money because shoplifting occurs and people run out of the store and they hop into a car and off they go, and charging banks because banks get robbed. And
excuse me, let him finish, please. Thank you.
I'm very concerned about the fee. And again, I go back to what I said last week or 2 weeks ago. The fees are supposed to be cost recovery. We're supposed to do something, and we shouldn't be creating work just for the sake of moving forward with a fee.
So before anybody else speaks, I want to assure you that we posted this meeting, the regular meeting, to start when this meeting was finished. So we are allowed to go over the time. And I should have said at the beginning of the meeting for people that are waiting for the 6 o'clock hour, and we haven't started it. So my question is, at this point, do we have a consensus here of that you want to charge? We're not going to vote on this tonight, so we got to give staff something to look into to present this, because we'll have to bring it back at another time. That you all believe that we should continue with the initial liquor license. Is that so? That's not going to go away, because requests from some citizens were no cost at all. So, okay, so we've got that one settled. Now, the second part of this is that you have to give staff some direction. Do you want them to come up with a figure that takes care of the administrative part of issuing renewal, and then come back to us with information from the state and how they discover if somebody has had some violations of that, and then maybe just a short report from our police chief on some of the way we've handled it in Goodyear, because you probably need to research it a little bit and see how many, so we have some stats and some information, and then come up. I think at that point, do you think you could vote on what you want to do? Is there anything I need to add to this? Because I think we can go on this discussion. I don't think there's anything we haven't brought up about the discussion.
Madam Mayor, can we
yes.
just post this as an item for discussion, as a single fee that we want to look at in a future meeting, and we'll get a staff report, and then we can vote on how we want to handle it.
That's right. I think that's what I just said, but very good. You said it so much better than I, Gary, but yes, that's no, I don't mind at all. I love it when you capitalize, capsulize what I'm trying to say. You had a point, Joe.
No, just real quick, I know we have a business license, and I'd like to know from staff too, as part of the data, whether they can extract by category the type of license we have, and if they can, that means we can track liquor license in restaurants. Do they have a coding sufficient to pull those out? Okay, and if not, I'd ask why, because it's a database, and I don't know why wouldn't be set up like that. So that might get to the vice mayor's point of knowing what's out there. So.
City clerk.
We keep a list of active liquor licenses.
All right.
So we do.
Sherry?
We don't know if someone suddenly decides to close shop. We're not notified, but we have a list of.
Okay. Sherry?
Well, I think we've had a little bit of apples and oranges going here with the administration portion of the fee, which what it was intended to do in the clerk's office, as opposed to the PD's portion of enforcement. And perhaps the chief could come back with numbers. Is this a hardship on his department? Is this something that he needs? And then I'd be happy to look at that, the fee and the number, if it is actually a hardship to the police and it does have a lot of calls or something, if it is something you're finding you have a problem, or if it's just strictly, because the fee now is administrative.
Right. And in fact, staff may be able to come up with that, and actually in their suggestions. City Manager?
Yes, Mayor. What I would suggest is, next Monday, May 21st, we'll be adopting the tentative budget, and all that does, it sets the upper expenditure limitations, does not really pertain to this. This is being a revenue source. What I would suggest is we come back before the council on June 11th. Would really like to have this voted one way or the other before we start the fiscal year. And as such, there are a couple of follow-up items. We can update the comparison with the other cities. Right now, we're back to 2010, so we'll be able to provide an update that is more with the other cities that we benchmark against. The other is we'll come up with some of the state follow-ups as it relates to renewals, maybe a state 101 on liquor license renewal, as well as getting information for the police chief. But we will provide alternatives. We'll provide some alternatives as far as keeping it the same, where we might look at adjusting it. But I would suggest we do that on June the 11th.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Yes, Bill?
If we're going to provide data, Sherry was suggesting information from PD on the snatch and grab from the liquor displays. Beer runs.
Beer runs?
I'd also like to get the shoplifting data as well.
Okay.
Good. I think that's it. Now, I'm assuming before I adjourn this meeting that you're all going to want a quick break before we begin the second meeting, and because we have posted as such, we could do that. Oh, I'm sorry, Larry?
There was a little more on
You know, I
this.
saw the draft budget follow-up, and we were having that discussion.
Very simply, from the city council's perspective, we can ask Terry to come up, but if there aren't questions from the information we sent you, there's no reason to force that
brought it with me
discussion.
Because, but there was nothing on the agenda, so I saw it on here, but not on here. So, is there any follow-up from any of you that, on the budget book? Any questions on this that was handed out?
I got mine.
Excuse me, Mr. Stipp, any questions on the budget book?
I think I've got mine.
Okay, everybody set? So I guess not, we're all set. So,
Thank you.
did you have your hand up? No.
I was
Oh, okay.
working the gavel.
Oh, you're working the gavel. So I'm going to adjourn this
mayor.
meeting, take a, let's say be back at 6:15, does that work? All right?
5 minutes.
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Meeting adjourned.